Well, I'm thankful we do not have visitors here today because my first mistake of the day was not welcoming our visitors. So if you're visiting online, we're grateful to have you, and we're grateful that you are all with us. I came across the poem by Phyllis Wheatley Peters, actually through a resource that the United Church of Christ provides online. And seeing that Friday was Juneteenth, and understanding that after Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, it took 2.5 years and the Confederate States of America losing the Civil War before some of my thick-headed ancestry in Texas discovering that the freeing of those who were called slaves was going to happen. And there were 2,000 Union troops in Galveston Bay who were there to make sure it was going to happen. Now, please understand that it took the 13th Amendment getting passed some years later before states started acknowledging the emancipation of those who were called slaves. And then it was replaced by Jim Crow laws in the South, where if white citizens in the South needed unpaid labor to harvest their crops or harvest their cotton, they could always go to the local sheriff, who could arrest persons of color on vagrancy charges and then ship them out to the various landowners to do not slave labor, but unpaid labor. I'm not sure I know the difference. So I was struck by her poem. Equally, I was struck by the Wheatleys of Boston. Now, Phyllis Wheatley was 7 or 8 years old when in Africa she was sold into slavery. That's real, folks. That's a part of our history. Denying it or not teaching it in schools because some may feel offended by it is the price of learning from history so that we don't repeat the mistakes of history. She was the second African American to become a published author in the United States, and she could have never done it without the support of the Wheatleys, without their giving her emancipation, without their son taking her to London to help her get her poems published there. A dichotomy, two natures, one that supported slavery and one that emancipated a slave child. We're capable of being a part of two natures, or having within us two natures. So how are we to live with the dichotomies of our lives? Today I want to offer the idea that part of the way that we manage the dichotomies within us is living the Jesus life. The Jesus life. What might that life be? Well, in Matthew's reading, he affirms for us our value and our worth to the divine. He tells us, look, live in such a way that what you say in the dark can be shouted from the rooftops. Live our lives in such a way that we don't have to pass laws to force the release of files of a terrible pedophile. And let the chips fall where they may for those who were a part of that heinousness. We're finding out that discussions about how to interrupt with our nation's elections were being held in a secure room. And that's being uncovered, and thanks be to God that it is. What Jesus is saying, or is recorded as saying in Matthew, is live your life. Live your life so that what you might say in conversation wouldn't be an embarrassment to you, your family, or God. Words of life rather than hate and despair. Don't be afraid of those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear the one who can destroy both soul and body in the place of the dead. Hades, that's the literal translation of Hades. We turned it into hell because hell is a wonderful way to get people to do what you want them to do. If you scare the Hades out of them. And I stopped at verse 32 because I didn't like verse 33. I'm not taking it from the text. Everyone therefore acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my parent in heaven. But verse 30 says, for those who don't, well, you get the place of the dead. But I don't want us to focus on that. I want us to focus on what Jesus says about who we are, our worth and value to God. If God knows the impact that we have on creation, sparrows, for example, how much more does God care for you and for me? Faults, good things, wrongs, right things. How much more does the divine parent love us? Now, he uses the analogy that the divine parent knows the number of hairs on our head. That's how intimate that knowledge is. And some of us are working at making it easier on the divine one. Fortunately, my mother's father had a healthy head full of hair until he died in his 80s. I never met my dad's father. In fact, never saw a picture of him. Part of living the Jesus life is letting go of hard things. The epistle reading in the liturgical calendar this week was Paul's writing to the church at Rome, writing, "What then are we to say? Should we continue in sin in order that grace may increase? By no means. How can we who died to sin go on living in it? Do you not know that all of us who were baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? Therefore, we were buried with him by baptism into death, so that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Divine One, so we also might walk in newness of life. For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we will certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. We know that our own self, our own ways, was crucified with him so that the body of sin might be destroyed, so we might no longer be enslaved to sin. For whoever has died is freed from sin. But if we died with Christ, we believe we will also live with him. We know that Christ, being raised from the dead, will never die again. Death no longer has dominion over him. The death he died to sin once for all. But the life he lives to God. So you must also consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to God in Christ. Now, let me put a contemporary, not spin, a contemporary understanding. UCCers don't talk a whole lot about sin, do we? The Baptist world I came from, as a young person, every other Sunday I was rededicating my life because I hadn't quite let go of some of the sinful desires of the flesh. Maybe that's too much information, but the point that Paul is making is that the old way of doing things, the hard things that we fight to hold on to, that are inconsistent with who we understand Jesus to be, those are things we can let go of. A lot of times we carry around stuff that we've held on to for far too long because we won't let go of it, either out of regret or out of wishing we could have done it differently. Living the Jesus life is being reminded that over and over and over again, he said to people not a whole lot different than we are. Oh, they didn't have the technology and all of the stuff that we had, and it was a different time and a different place in different cultures. But the humanity was the same. And the Jesus life is a humanity that enables us to let go of wrongs we may have done or wrongs that may have been done to us. He offers a path forward in letting go of the burdens we've borne for far too many years. Just something to think about. So what comes next? I'll let you know when I get there, if given the opportunity. But in the meantime, we have the opportunity to awake each day alive to God, alive in God's creation, knowing that we and all of creation are created in God's image, that we are beloved, that we are forever held, as my mother used to pray every morning at breakfast, in the hollow of God's hands. We are beloved. Those with whom we disagree are beloved. The contrast between leaders was never more visible than this week when you had a failed reflection pool rehab in contrast to the opening of a presidential center. Some friends were wondering why I hadn't responded to texts, and I said I was going through my own form of grieving, but that I found encouragement and hope, because the dream of being led by our better angels, led by the Spirit of God, is alive and well, and it will take us forward. This is a new day. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. If you'll turn and worship